Hello, welcome to the huddle. Today is Monday. If you noticed, Rachel and Sean are not on here today, but we are joined by Matthew Foldy. Matthew, thank you for doing this. Welcome to the huddle.
Hey guys, long-time listener, first-time joiner. Happy to be with you today. Sorry for the downgrade. You get me instead of Sean and Rachel to kick your week off over here, but happy to be here.
Well, we'll see. This may be a big upgrade. Both of them are out. They are hopefully back tomorrow. But Matthew, tell everyone for I'm sure almost everyone knows who you are, but for those who don't, just give us a little bit about your background here.
Well, I'm the token Republican of the two of us today, and I run the Washington Reporter, which is a conservative outlet that covers lots of Capitol Hill stuff. I interview President Trump a lot. I'm sure some of the stuff that we're covering today will get into what I've talked about with the president recently, and yeah, that's it.
Well, that's perfect. That's as good a reason as any. Did you have a good weekend? I mean, I'm still standing, which I'm happy about. As yesterday, the flies dropped. Anything exciting down in the DMV this weekend?
Will Sharp's birthday was very exciting. I was the DD, but it was out. I was out nevertheless so late that I felt as if I had a crippling hangover yesterday that I'm now fortunately over.
How? So I'll be 50 next year. If I stay out past midnight, I feel it for 2 or 3 days. So, sober or not, it really doesn't make a difference anymore at this age. How long does it take you to recover, get back to the norm?
I'm turning 30 this year, which I hate to say. And
all right, this is over.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I'll tell you. Look, Dan, you're not alone there. I was feeling it.
All right. Well, glad you were able to make it. You're a gamer.
But unlike Sean, I'm able to be up and at him at 8:30 on a Monday.
All right, you're fitting right in here. All right, so it is, another week. We will see. Last week by this hour, we already had kind of, world-breaking news about Trump granting an extension. So we'll see what this week brings. But first, let's go to the day book. 8 a.m. right now, I believe, he is speaking. The great Rahm Emanuel is at the St. Anselm Institute of Politics and Eggs breakfast in Manchester, New Hampshire. This is like a stop on the circuit. We don't know if New Hampshire will go first. Matthew, you went to school in Chicago. Thoughts on Rahm Emanuel, who keeps plugging along out there?
Honestly, I think that he has 0% chance of being anything particularly relevant for Democrats. Remember that Biden sent him to Japan when Biden was president. And from my understanding, when I was talking with people in the Japanese foreign ministry, he didn't do a particularly good job Japan is an incredibly important country for the United States of America because of its proximity to China. Now, the reason I don't think that Rahm can win really much of anything in a Democratic primary is he obviously was mayor of Chicago, and I was at the University of Chicago while he was still mayor. And then I was an elected official in Chicago. I was a ward committee man for the 5th ward where Chicago is. And in 2015, he was already facing major ire from the left. Yeah. Chuy Garcia, who at that point no one had heard of, now he's a congressman who is leaving Congress at the end of this term, came basically out of nowhere. He had Bernie Sanders support. Bernie is obviously another UChicago alum, and really was able to capture a lot of the excitement of the left. And then Rahm saw the writing on the wall, and in 2019 decided to not run for re-election.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what his constituency is, but if you look back to when he was in Congress, this is obviously before Obama was president, and he was the chair of the DCCC, he did and is famous for doing what the Democrats don't really want to do right now, which is recruit veterans, normal people, to win in incredibly Republican areas. And in 2006, we all know how that ended for Republicans. It was an electoral wipeout, bar none, really. And he was one of the main orchestrators of that. Is that where I think the Democrats want to be in 2026 and 2028? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I think that for those who haven't seen it, there was a big profile in Politico. It's still up on their website about Rahm. I mean, I think I don't disagree that when you look out and think about a coalition in a Democratic primary, it is still a little challenging. What I do to kind of play out Rahm ultimately winning, where I think though Rahm is going to be a force is he is fearless. He is not going to be afraid to challenge the left. And ultimately, for the party to have this debate is going to be healthy. I think today you'd put your money more on the party leaning left, but we'll see, because even in primaries so far, really left candidates are not winning when they're squaring off in a contested primary against more moderate candidates. But we'll see.
This guy, let me add one other thing, by the way. This guy, obviously, in addition to being a knife fighter, sending the fish heads a la Godfather.
Yep.
When he was mayor, obviously he's Jewish, so that is basically disqualifying in a Democratic primary, actually. And when I was in school at U Chicago, the left did their insane anti-Semitic boycott Israel and only the Jews resolution in our student government that's totally meaningless. And the way in which the left hijacked this meeting from the beginning was you had, I don't know, the Queers for Palestine or whatever it was, say, we would like to take a moment of silence for victims of gun violence in Chicago. Okay, lots of victims of gun violence. And also for everyone murdered by Israel. Remember that our mayor was a volunteer in the IDF, blah, 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 blah. He's responsible for all of these deaths. These people who were in college with me are now, my age, 29 and whatnot, and ascending in the ranks of the Democratic Party staff. They're crazy. These people are, and that's where they were in college. There's been very little moderating force on them since then. And that's going to be something that he's going to, you saw Josh Shapiro is falsely being attacked as an IDF veteran or something like that. He's not.
Well, I think we'll see. I think, yeah, the issue of Israel is going to dominate, I think, both parties here over the next couple of years. And we'll get into the conflict in Iran, I think, may feed part of that. So just for the rest of the day book here today, 10:15, Donald Trump takes a photo with current White House interns. Fun fact, I interned in the White House in 1999, summer of 99. A great highlight. The photo is a big deal. It's fun to do it and look back. 10:30.
You were probably the second most famous Clinton intern.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. We had what were known as the Monica rules, which was the dress code. It applied to men, but it was more focused on women. And when they briefed you on that your first day, everyone looked around and tried, do we think we're hearing what we're hearing? And the answer was yes, we are.
The dress code was no blue dress. Is that right?
Yeah. And then 12 o'clock, the House meets in a pro forma session. 1:30, Donald Trump participates in a policy meeting. Odds that opens up to the press, I think, are pretty high, but currently closed press. And then if he doesn't see the press at 1:30, 4 o'clock, Matthew, he has signing time. So the odds, I think, between one or both of those that he talks, pretty high.
Very high.
Yeah, so we will see. So before we jump into it here, just quickly, All Family Pharmacy. Sean and Rachel, I hope they are, or already has done it, gone to allfamilypharmacy.com/huddle, because both of them are out. And we talk all the time, Matthew, you were out late here the other night. You have other things you want to do because you slept in. Rather than going to the pharmacy, waiting in line, sometimes they don't have your prescription or it's not ready. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com. You fill out a short form. It's reviewed by a licensed medical professional. And assuming it's a legit issue, they will send it directly to your door. They have lots of antibacterial medicines and all sorts of stuff. They have hundreds of things to choose from. Comes right to your door. Super convenient. Allows you to do other things. So go to allfamilypharmacy.com/huddle and use the code HUDDLE10 for 10% off. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So let's jump into this here because, as it has, Matthew, for the last 4 weeks, as we enter another week here, Iran continues to dominate. Donald Trump last night, flying back from Palm Beach to D.C., talked on Air Force One, mostly about this issue. You and I were texting yesterday evening. There's this interesting kind of dynamic playing out right now, which is not unique to Trump. Kind of all presidents to some extent when there's conflicts. you want to project confidence. You want to give people confidence that we're doing well, that things are on the right path. No doubt, Donald Trump's bravado is front and center. But Donald Trump kind of saying that essentially last week it was we've already won. This week he is saying last night he says they've already agreed to the 15 points that we put in our proposal to them. Now he's saying we've asked for a few more. He's saying we may just take the oil in Carg Island. But at the same time, you go to whether it's the right or the left, any website or news, you turn on TV, the strait is still closed. Oil prices continue to go up. And we are amassing troops who I suppose may not do anything, but there's now, I think, 10,000 ground troops in the region. It sounds like we may be on the verge of either invading Carg Island, invading the coastline to try to reopen the strait, and or going in to take their nuclear material. What do you think of this kind of projecting confidence, but these kind of, I don't want to call them side stories, but these kind of reality stories that are sitting out there?
So it's a good question. And I think the unfortunate thing is we're trying to figure out what's going on in a military campaign as it's happening. And by the way, in 10 years, it'll be nice to have had all of the benefit of hindsight. So we're operating under this massive fog of war right now. And so I don't know what to make hay of versus what not to make hay of. But the reality is, obviously, if we're going to do things in Iran, the power projection and literal troop deployment is a necessity. Remember, in the buildup to the strikes that killed the Ayatollah, we amassed a fleet in the entire Middle East. You can't do these things if you have troops, here, right? It's not going to be like Operation Midnight Hammer, where they're flying out of Missouri, dropping bombs, flying home under the cover of darkness, and no one sees it happening. So this is making sure we're taking no options off the table, which, by the way, is not only vintage Trump negotiation, that's vintage any negotiation. So in one of my interviews with Trump, I think this one I did when I was returning from meeting the Rwandan president in my layover in Ethiopia, I think I asked him, because remember, obviously in January, you had tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of Iranians in the streets clamoring for a literal regime change. And we didn't do anything as America then. We ended up waiting, see if the negotiations would work. Obviously, they weren't going to work. These are genocidal fanatics, religiously motivated for these negotiations not to work. And I asked Trump, do you think the Iranian people should right now rise up, overthrow the government? This is like 12 gay Ayatollahs ago at this point. But he said, no, they should wait until we do the big one, something along those lines. Now, I don't think, and everything that's happened since then, I don't think the big one has been deployed, dropped, whatever. I don't know what that is. And so that's, I think, one of the wild cards, because you were talking about, where American troops are, what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. We don't really have good visibility right now into what's going on in Iran, because they're in our almost 1,000 of nationwide internet shutdown. That's, I think, one of the variables here. What the heck is going on with the very same people who were rioting in the streets just 2 months ago to overthrow their regime? I do think that, as you were noting, at either 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock today, tomorrow, whenever, Trump will obviously answer tons of questions. Huge transparency delta between Trump and Iran and Biden and Afghanistan, and an outcome delta as well. But I think when you're a journalist and you're either interviewing the president or you're shouting questions at him, there's no point in asking, in my opinion, what he calls stupid questions. Mr. President, can you please tell us your exact military plans in the middle of a war with Iran so that the enemy can know what to expect?
Well, I think, though, it's not
going to answer it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the bigger thing is, who do you think his audience is with this, what is really a dual track, right? It is, on the one hand, we're winning. Basically, this is easy, that they're begging us to, I've never heard of somebody begging for a deal, and then yet in the next breath you say they're holding out. right? Because by nature, when you have a fire sale or somebody is desperate, they don't hold out, right? They need the deal. So you get the, superior terms because they have no leverage to hold out. So he is clearly messaging to one crowd this projection of strength. But then on the other side, he, says it's either fake news or he says I'm keeping all my options open. Who do you think his audience is? And do you think at some point these lines on the horizon meet? Which is, you can't keep saying everything is great and we've won and they're begging, and then turn around and say, I just announced, 10,000 troops just went into the shore.
So obviously Trump became president in 2016 in large part due to his opposition with the war in Iraq. And I don't think that what's going on here really bears much similarity. I mean, even in Venezuela, obviously, which I think everyone regards as a success except for Maduro, Trump did not really do regime change. The illegitimate vice president is now still the president of Venezuela. I don't know who obviously will be running Iran later. But I mean, Sean was talking about this on Friday. Trump, and you're saying it, Dan, as well, with a dual track, Trump has to be communicating with a lot of people. The American people, first and foremost, about the price of gas. The Gulf Arab countries who are, as we speak, probably taking a smattering of income. And you noted last week that Iran still has ballistic missiles and missiles. But the graph of their firepower and their rate of fire has gone down. It is declining exponentially. So they still have a couple, but again, far less than they did. I was in Israel last year. Coincidentally, we landed at 6 hours before Israel struck the Iranian nuclear facilities. And then I spent a week in a bomb shelter. Let me tell you, the rate of fire of the Iranian ballistic missiles then, I'd much rather be dealing with what they're firing today. It's sort of it seems like a last gasp. So the American people saying, hey, we know you're paying too much for gas. I think that's where his energy, domestic energy policy will be able to help offset some of that. The Gulf Arabs who are taking fire, Israel, NATO, and then the rest of the other, the world that relies far more on the Strait of Hormuz than we do. So that's a lot. That's not dual track. That's like 6-time tracking on this. And so each message, I think, depending on what it is, goes to a different one of those crowds. But I think the main one that you were, correctly noting, that America is strong and we are winning, goes to all of those. And then beyond that, you can look at how each of those get segmented. And I think if you look at Trump's foreign policy, look, it's almost April now. In 2026 versus 2025, in 2025, obviously he was gunning for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is fake and gets given to horrible people all of the time. And I think this year he's showing the world, okay, well, I didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. I was joking about this when it was, obviously he was not going to get it because this is run by people who hate him. This year, it's if you didn't like me when I was trying for the Nobel Peace Prize, just wait until I try and become the strong guy and flexing American foreign policy. We started 2026 off by sending Delta Force in, let's say an homage to Chuck Norris, to just grab Maduro and his wife, Mirandize them in Venezuela, and take them home. So who's he talking to with each of this? I think those are the buckets, and then look at whatever any given message that we're looking at is, and kind of assign it into one of those buckets. But broadly speaking, I think his message is, we are doing the right thing. NATO, we've salvaged your military alliance. And as you guys noted last week, we've propped you up for 80 years. Come help us out. Not because we need it, but because we're spending so much money on you guys. Can you do anything? Spain, England, what's going on here? That's a lot. That you're asking a great question. I don't think that we're going to know definitively what the answer is until the dust has settled. But that's how
I think the challenge is I think he's speaking to MAGA directly. I think he is trying to say to them, on the one hand, I know you guys don't love this. It's going to be over soon. Kind of stick with me. On the other hand, let me project strength. And I still think today he's in the same place he was last week. He is trying to define victory, and he's trying to see if something sticks. So last week it was, we've already won. Like, I could get out right now, but I'm not. It was, I don't need to do this straight. It's everyone else's problem, not mine. And last night he road tested, we've already done regime change, right? We've killed the leaders, when in fact, it's kind of like if you killed the, I'm going to use this rhetorically here, Trump and JD Vance, but Mike Johnson is your president, same, kind of ideology, same thing. So to me, he is road testing kind of different ways to talk about this, to try to close this out. But at the same time, this major escalation, may be brewing, but we'll see. It's Monday.
To the extent, by the way, real quick, that he is messaging to MAGA specifically. I was at CPAC last week, and Steve Bannon was trying to undercut that message from stage, and it totally backfired. So Trump, as he said a million times, I've created this movement. I know what its pulse is. I think he's still got it.
Yep. So we'll see. But all right, let's go to the next. I mean, Matthew, I don't know if you were watching Friday. I think we all clearly wrongfully assumed that when Thune cut the deal, it was reported that Trump had blessed it, that there might be a little, kvetching from the House, but that because Trump had blessed it, Trump did not want the headlines anymore of this dysfunction. It would pass. Well, folks, we make mistakes. We were wrong. It did not. So here we are. To me, I opened the news this morning. Miranda Devine, a friend of the president's, she's interviewed him, lead writer on the New York Post, savaging John Thune for leaving town, talking about him kind of walking through Reagan Airport. You have TMZ out there now offering money for photos of people. Lindsey Graham got caught at Disney World this weekend. I think, our thought was kind of in DC, everybody looks terrible right now. But publicly, it does appear Republicans are taking the brunt of this with the sense of they can't get on the same page, right? Johnson and Thune are fighting, and Trump, as he often does, is sitting back kind of like, I'm not going to get involved in this while you guys argue. Where do you think this goes? I mean, do you think Republicans can successfully pin this on Democrats, or do you think right now they got to get their own, they have a problem internally right now?
So when I was flying to CPAC on Friday morning, super early in the morning out of Reagan, there was somehow already a line at TSA pre-check. And this was before ICE, National Guard got sent to airports, I believe, because I didn't see any there. And I didn't almost miss my flight. I'm not going to pretend that was the case because I woke up ungodly early hour. But if I had missed my flight and then therefore missed speaking at the conference I was scheduled at, et cetera, I would be really angry. Yeah. And I think that when that's the entire, to the extent that the American people are paying attention to this shutdown, it's only through the lens of flight delays. I don't think there's anything else that is being thought about. And that, I think, is bad for everyone in the government. Now, Republicans control the government, but if I'm delayed, I joked when I returned from India last month, Global Entry had still been closed. And I said, all right, I sent to my friend's video of it. I said, all right, well, thank you, Senate Democrats, for closing the government down for no reason so that I have to stand in line for an hour for no reason instead of walking through Global Entry. So I think that, you can pick your villain, whoever you want to blame if you're sitting in line. It's probably just bad for, as you noted, people in DC, because everyone can be blamed, I think, fairly credibly if you miss your flight. How does it end? Obviously, look, I don't think anyone knows at this point. I think both parties will not like the choose your own adventure government funding operation that looks like that may have emerged as a bit of a precedent. As Sean said last week, you could see Republicans saying, all right, we're going to fund 98% of the government. We're not going to fund Planned Parenthood. And then will Democrats shut the government down over Planned Parenthood? By the way, 100% they would. And once TSA does get funded, whether it's via Elon Musk cutting a check, via Trump reallocating money, obviously there will still be the backlog from the people who have quit for good. That's not good. But at that point, I think the government shutdown fades not only to like the back end of this show, but completely off of people's minds, right? Even remember in the shutdown of last year, it didn't really come to the forefront until we got closer to Thanksgiving, travel, things like that. Because most of these government shutdowns are very partial shutdowns. And so people going about their daily lives don't realize that there is a government shutdown until you get to things like TSA. And I think vis-a-vis this show, by the way, the main thing that I would look at is once this is resolved, because it will be, what does that mean if there's going to be another reconciliation bill? Because that's, I think, what this shutdown means for the, political brained people who are at 8:56 in the morning on a Monday listening to people talking about politics. Will there be another reconciliation bill this year? I have no idea. I feel like it's like a metronome. It's like one day it's clear yes, then it's a clear no. I think it's now almost April. Every day that goes by makes it less likely that Republicans are going to be able to jam something through there. If they do, from the interviews I've done with people in Congress, it's clearly going to be prioritizing healthcare. What does that mean? I have no clue.
I think the interesting thing here is it is remarkable that Democrats are still holding firm over ICE reforms, and yet they are paying no price for that. I mean, I, for one, thought it was inevitable when these lines started that there would be more focus on that. But I am astonished at just the complete Republican dysfunction on this issue, because they are so arguing with one another. And Sean and I got into it last week. At the end of the day, Donald Trump has got to get control of his own party. And I think he doesn't like to get involved in this stuff. And so the fact that Johnson and Thune are bickering and the headline is they're fighting, they're not aligned, I just think it does let Democrats off the hook. But I do agree with you. At some point, people say enough, like whether it's for work or going to see family or summer travel or whatever. If the airports are a dysfunction, it ultimately, I do think Democrats are playing with a little bit of fire. But today, I think.
Look, we've got Passover travel, we've got Easter travel,
Easter travel,
dealing with the spring break hangover. It doesn't matter if you miss your flight. Have you missed flights? I'm sure at some point in your life, yeah.
I came close in, Los Angeles when I was there recently. Thankfully, we were able to get through. But to your point, we got there almost 3 hours early. I mean, we were prepared to, have the super long wait. And it obviously, thankfully, a good problem to have. It didn't materialize.
I do think that you were talking about the lawmakers breezing through the airports. I think at some point, I think this might be the first time that most people in America realize that lawmakers get these escorts to go through the airports. You're seeing a little bit of bipartisanship on the House side of lawmakers saying, we don't really need this perk, because it does look incredibly out of touch.
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, their parking, their ability to call it, to have special desks that have access to control towers. I mean, it's when I was chief of staff and I learned about all that, I was like, whoa, this is pretty special.
But but where you see them being escorted through, that is where you can see it,
Absolutely. Well, we will see. This kind of feeds in. And by the way, don't lose track of the fact that tomorrow is the end of the first quarter fundraising deadline. There are more than a few members of Congress who are out of town raising money as we speak right now. They will be doing the same thing tomorrow. Then they will have their reports. So I'm sure a pure coincidence that members wanted to hustle out of town to hit the fundraising circuit. And that leads us into the Senate map. So over the weekend, obviously Democrats in the Senate, they need to pick up, assuming that they can hold everything, they need to pick up 4 seats to overcome J.D. Vance breaking a 50-50 tie. We talked to the obvious ones: Ohio, Maine, North Carolina. One of the big questions in Democratic circles, Matthew, has been, what is that 4th state? People thought Texas, but Tallarico has struggled a little as the oppo has come against him since his primary win. We've talked about Iowa, as we did last week, kind of the farmers being disgruntled over tariffs, amongst other things. And Alaska is a state that people have talked about. The DSCC recruited Mary, what's her name, the Congresswoman. And a poll comes out this weekend that shows her leading by 5 points. It's a hard state to poll. It is a very unpredictable state. But that now puts 4 states on the board where today Democratic candidates lead. Now, a poll came out this weekend that shows in New Hampshire, Chris Pappas with only, I think it's a 1-point lead on John Sununu. So that is, John Sununu, former senator.
Well, honestly, that is a big advantage for him.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And by the way, he's not an incumbent right now, which is not a good time to be an incumbent. And then there is Michigan, which is a complete mess, while Democrats battle it out. But let's just talk about this. The map now is kind of wild, right? You now see a path. It is possible for Democrats to get the majority. We could lose every one of those seats. I mean, that is, but what do you make of this kind of evolving dynamic now where, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Democrats could win back the Senate?
I actually think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's completely out of the realm of possibility just because of the states that are up. Now, they could, I think Democrats, look, if the election were today, which it isn't, would probably be favored to flip North Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, Roy Cooper is a fundraising machine. But I just don't see a path to 51 for them. I would say, by the way, a race we're never going to talk about this year is in New Mexico, where the Republican Party was so inept, they don't even have a candidate, which is crazy. There hasn't been that much federal success for Republicans in New Mexico, but Trump consistently comes close to winning there. And they had Susana Martinez as a Republican governor there not that long ago. To have no candidate, I mean, Democrats will have sacrificial lamb candidates in Idaho. Republicans will have sacrificial lamb candidates in Oregon. So no candidate is very bad, especially because there is a very competitive House race there. So that one, I promise you, we're never going to talk about again. Iowa, by the way, is another interesting one, and I'm sure we'll delve into Michigan in a second, but the Democrats have a crazy divisive primary there that I think will further complicate their ability to win that seat. I don't think Ashley Hinson will not be a senator. I think that she will be a senator.
Yeah, she's a good candidate. She's a very good candidate.
And the Democrats are very right now split between, the classic establishment-backed Schumer candidate and Elizabeth Warren-backed far-left candidate. So that will only come against. It's actually rare for most of the interesting primaries to be on the Democratic side. Another interesting Republican one is obviously what's going on in Louisiana, which is interesting for a lot of reasons, especially because it's pitting Trump versus the National Republican Senatorial Committee, right? The NRSC run by Tim Scott, which will, as a rule, basically back all incumbents. Which is
what both committees do. Yeah. Rule number one for D's or R's is you support incumbents first. Yep.
And Trump obviously has endorsed Julia Letlow, who's a Republican congresswoman, against the incumbent senator, Bill Cassidy. And that is one of the jungle primary states. So it introduces a lot of uncertainty there. I think the Alaska poll, by the way, is probably fake in terms of, hey, it's gin up excitement. There's no way to falsify it ever, because maybe Peltolta is up 5 or 8 points, as you said, right now. I don't think she is. Will that be the case through November? I certainly don't think so. But Alaska does vote funkily. I think if you want to have some copium for the left with that Senate race, they have their ranked choice voting that's obviously unconstitutional on a federal level. So that might be a little bit crazy. But this is a state that has given Democrats no hope whatsoever on a statewide basis in years. I can't even think of the last.
Well, Mark Bagich would be your last.
Because the House race is at large, Peltolta obviously had won that. But remember that she was elected via that crazy election featuring Sarah Palin, Nick Begich, who's now the congressman there, and a whole bunch of other things that went haywire for Republicans for very weird timing and electoral reasons. And then when it was a normal election, which it was last November, she gets defeated. I think the big obviously was their last federally elected senator.
I think the big question is if the current dynamic holds in kind of broadly speaking, Matthew, at what point the White House is sitting on a ton of cash, right?
An unbelievable amount.
Trump associated entities have, I think, about $500 million right now sitting out there. I've been around long enough to see when you say, look, the House may be gone. We have to hold the Senate, right? And you tell everybody in town in Washington, the lobbyists, corporations, we are all in on creating a firewall to not lose the Senate. I don't think they're there yet. But if this continues, I agree with you. Alaska, at the end of the day, likely remains Republican. I think Iowa, Ashley Hinton is a great candidate, likely remains Republican. But you can't, bank on right now that dynamic. So the thing I'm watching is, does the White House kind of start to cut the House loose a little bit? And that has all sorts of psychological impacts. And do you get some more retirements in the House if they see that? But I am watching, because we have our mess in Michigan, as you mentioned. Obviously Maine, where we'll see if.
Well, can you go through that from your standpoint? I mean, Michigan, as I'm looking at it, Mike Rogers has
great
had
candidate.
He's getting the benefit that Alyssa Slotkin did in 2024 of running, just chilling. He's going to diners, he's going to job fairs, he's going to machine sheds. He's got a clear path to the nomination. The Democrats are so concerned about this primary, they tried to move it up, but then they were unsuccessful in doing that. So, I mean, what the hell is going on there?
Well, I think this is Michigan. To me, I've said this for now almost 14 months. It's the canary in the coal mine, because it has everything. It has a moderate. It has a left candidate that Bernie Sanders backed very early. It has kind of a hybrid candidate. I think this is healthy. I actually think this is great for the party. I think it's the same dynamic you're going to have in 2028 in the presidential. I think the issue of Israel, the issue of AIPAC, the issue of a message that's targeted towards the kind of working class versus a broader kind of slightly more business friendly message. It's all playing out. So I think we will see what ends up happening. I think, talking to people who are very involved in this race, nobody is really sure. I think the feeling is that Haley is struggling a little bit. I think people had hoped she might pull away a little bit. Look, I think if we woke up, would it surprise me if we won 4 of the seats we just talked about, but we lost Michigan? It would not surprise me. I agree with you. I think Mike Rogers, he's run statewide before. He came very close. He's a very good candidate. It's one of the few times recently in one of these states. It's like Dave McCormick, where you kind of, the second time around, everybody's with you. The field is cleared. You're wiser. You're better. Your staff is more experienced. And I also think New Hampshire, it is an anti-incumbent mood. But I will say, my friends on Maryland Avenue, they think at the end of the day, the wave is so big right now that even with all this mess, they think we pull both of those seats out, but they're not under any illusion it's going to be tough. And this is where that House dynamic, it plays both ways. They'll start getting more and more money in the Democratic Party going toward the DSCC, going toward the outside groups to try to pick it up. So we'll see.
Way, but in Michigan and New Hampshire, both of those states have incredibly interesting governor's races. In New Hampshire, it's interesting just because Kelly Ayotte will win probably near 60%. And there will be obviously a lot of ticket splitters just because New Hampshire consistently elects Republicans to the governor's mansion and consistently elects Democrats statewide on a federal level. But I think, I mean, even to your sort of joking confusion earlier, John Sununu, Chris Sununu, that is probably the last name Sununu in New Hampshire is going to be worth something.
Yeah, totally.
But whereas in Michigan, remember, you have Mike Dugan, the mayor of Detroit, still running as a third-party candidate for governor. That I think he's going to maybe get some Republicans, but he's going to just siphon votes from Democrats out of Detroit, which I think is very good for whoever the Republicans nominate for governor, as well as for Mike Rogers, because Democrats to win obviously need huge turnout in Detroit. And if you've got their popular mayor who won as a white guy in Detroit via a write-in campaign one time, siphoning these votes away, that's going to be tough. I don't know. I don't even know of a race that would be parallel in terms of how that is a fascinating race. I've tried to figure out why he's doing this. And I think he is just done with the Democratic Party, although his gubernatorial campaign is not really Republican. But that's going to be a complicating factor there. And I will say, though, in Michigan, this to me has always bothered me, so I'm just going to say it, of Hassan Piker as the left's Joe Rogan. Hassan Piker is nothing like Joe Rogan. I don't know if you know this. Apparently no one has known this. His uncle is Cenk Uygur with the Young Turks, who's as insane as can be. Ran for president, even though he was ineligible. And Hassan Piker has done nothing with his life. He is a loser who sits and plays video games all day. Joe Rogan is the most important podcaster on planet Earth, and he had an insanely wide-ranging career that built him a massive audience. Hassan Piker's audience is large, crazy, and I think you can switch into the no kings thing from here, but I think is going to take the Democrats to a place where they don't want to go. The idea, though, that he's a Joe Rogan-esque figure is one of the most smooth-brained oversimplifications possible. I've listened to almost 1,000 episodes of Joe Rogan, and I've never heard him say America deserved 9/11 and the other litany of absolutely insane, un-American. Hassan Piker was just on a communist propaganda tour of Cuba. If I were a Democrat, I would not want to tie myself to this lunatic.
Well, I think yeah, we could spend all show on Hassan Piker. It's an interesting dynamic because he does have a huge following. Some of the main issues that he speaks on are obviously very resonant with a portion of our party. And just based on the number of Democrats, when Politico reached out, for those who haven't seen it, he's going to campaign in Michigan. Haley Stevens and Mary both have come out kind of saying, hey, what are you doing? This guy's divisive. Third Way came out with a real scathing, set of social media posts that he's anti-Semitic, amongst other things. And Hassan Piker's not apologizing. And there are some candidates have said, hey, we would go on his podcast, Gavin Newsom, Rahm Emanuel, we're not afraid to speak with people we disagree with. We'll go anywhere. Others have said absolutely not. Some, as you would imagine, were silent, would not respond. I think as
what would you advise?
Well, I would talk to anybody. I think part of the problem is you get people who are afraid because they don't want to speak their mind. They don't want to be honest. They struggle when the host doesn't agree with them. And that's where you get in trouble, right? I mean, there is something about going in and being able to have a conversation with people. But as you get the rise of independent media, there is going to be more of this on both sides, which is the way you build audience is by saying controversial stuff, by having kind of hot takes. And that is going to create a challenge. But we need to move on because we're going to go to No Kings. Before we do that, we always have to remind people, our friends at Cozy Earth. Matthew, if you've never tried Cozy Earth, I highly, highly recommend you try it. And folks, we've talked about pajamas, we've talked about masks, candles, everything. I can't believe it's coming up. Mother's Day. Mother's Day, before you know it, it's going to be here. It's almost April. And then, of course, it's right in May there. Mother's Day, Cozy Earth is going to celebrate Mother's Day with all sorts of great offers here. You go to CozyEarth.com, you get your mom a blanket, you could get her pajamas, you could get her all sorts of stuff. They make great products. We love them. The other night, we had turned the heat off because it was warm here in New York City, but it got cold at night. I went to get into bed and the blanket in our bedroom was missing. And it turns out one of the kids took the Cozy Earth bubble blanket to their bedroom. I was not very pleased, did not have as good a night of sleep as I had hoped. So the lesson is, in our house, we need to buy more Cozy Earth products. So go to CozyEarth.com, use our code HUDDLE for up to 20% off. Go to CozyEarth.com and use our code HUDDLE for 20% off. So this is, we were kind of, before that, a segue. No Kings. We did not talk about this much last week. And thank you to all those on social media who called us out over the weekend and said, hey, how come you guys kind of missed this big thing? Look, it is immensely fascinating because the energy and the intensity in the Democratic Party continues to be at 11, right? The base remains engaged. They remained outraged. And, No Kings, people can laugh at it, laugh at the name, say it's ridiculous. But at the end of the day, anytime a party is getting thousands of people to show up in the street on a, Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, it says something. Just as Democrats dismiss the Tea Party as, astroturfing and it's all fake news. Of course, it wasn't. Democrats continue to organize these rallies. They continue to get attention. I'll just say to you, Matthew, I think the pro of it is, the good of it is engaging people. It does get more people to sign up, to volunteer for campaigns, to donate money, to really you want your intensity number high. I think the bad news is the average voter that we're trying to peel back to vote for us doesn't see Donald Trump as a king, thinks, it's not like we're out there talking about healthcare and kind of issues that are top of mind for people. A lot of this goes back to the idea of democracy under threat and Trump's a Nazi and kind of things that I think the average voter does not equate or see him as. But I think, as a Republican, when you look at the No Kings, do you laugh? Do you say maybe there's something there? How do you view the No Kings movement?
Well, as a Republican, as American, I love no kings. We haven't had a king since 1776. And, I think Mazie Hirono, famously one of the dumbest people in elected politics, she's right about this because she was talking about over the weekend, she said that Donald Trump is not a king, will not be a king, and will never be a king. Okay, congratulations. We don't have a king. And the thing to me, honestly, that I think is just the norm. Look, this is America. You can have whatever beliefs you want. Obviously, that's one of the great things about this being America. But if we had a king, these people would all be executed. You know how we know that that's the case, Dan? Because that's what just happened in Iran. When people are marching the streets, protesting an actually oppressive government, tens of thousands of them are killed. So I think the premise of it, honestly, if it had a different name, I think it would be a little bit less obviously easy to disparage. In addition to, I don't know what the message is other than obviously we hate Trump. But I think if you're getting it's kind of like the Democrats' alternative reality State of the Union, where you have these frog people on stage with people who are likely running for president as Democrats. When you drive past these rallies, I didn't this weekend, I didn't see it, but when I was driving past one that was held, I think on Rosh Hashanah, I was coming home from synagogue, and they're like, it looks like a costume party, which I think makes the message that you're trying to say less serious. If Trump is this evil dictator, be serious. And I think this isn't a fundamentally serious thing. You see a lot of man on the street reporting from these rallies where, I like to see a lot of the funding sources into them, asking, what are you here for? People have no idea, but I think it's good for people to be politically engaged. I'm just not sure what the point is. And I think Republicans look at, in the same way that a Democrat could use a crazy Tea Party speaker against a Republican. The amount of fodder of that, I mean, these are in New York City. I think they were waving communist flags. They didn't have kings in communist countries, but they had totalitarian dictators. So I think that this won't really matter electorally in the sense of, do people hold crazy speakers against candidates? I don't think they usually do, but the groups that are sponsoring this, Fox News has done amazing reporting on the partnerships that have gone into the No Kings. I mean, these are literally anti-American organizations expressly that are co-sponsoring it with that. And when you have that, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be particularly good. But yeah, I think it does speak to the Democratic enthusiasm. I just think if you've got that enthusiasm, you should probably channel it in a way that gives Republicans less shooting fish in a barrel level photo ops and videos to use against your party.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because again, you Republicans have a massive intensity problem, and Democrats, if anything, our problem is they're so intense that, as you say, at times the visuals and some of what is being said is not going to sell well in parts of this country that we need to win back. But I do think Republicans dismiss this at their own peril. There is clearly massive energy still in the Democratic Party. And that, we need to get from here to November and then obviously, going forward. But and at the end of the day, being anti-Trump is only going to get us so far. And that will be the thing to monitor. But let's go to the last topic here. A wild story over the weekend here. For those who don't remember, it was a couple years ago, Eric Swalwell was dating a woman. He's single. He was not married. And it turned out that she was a Chinese spy. And when the woman found out that there was a FBI investigation, she fled the country. Swalwell claimed, he had absolutely no knowledge that she was a spy. He was, pretty embarrassed. The FBI at the time looked into it, determined that he didn't do anything wrong. The House did its own investigation under Republicans, did not determine anything had been done that was wrong. But the story comes out over the weekend Kash Patel, it's alleged that the DC and the director directly has ordered the local Bay Area FBI to kind of resurface this report, to go back through it, to scrub out, to redact, sensitive information. But it sounds like this report may be coming back into the public. And I will, remind people, traditionally, when the FBI does an investigation and they do not find anything, you do not historically publish the report. Eric Swalwell, by the way, is the leading Democrat, or one of them, in the California governor's race, where Republicans right now are the top. Both of them are the two top vote getters. Matthew, what do you make? I mean, this is a wild story. If true, that the FBI is getting ready to rush this report out.
By the way, if two Republicans advance in California, which I don't think
will be amazing.
Yes, but they will blow that system up so fast. The Democrats will say, all right, this is a threat to democracy. I mean, it is like, and this has happened in House races for U.S. House in California, where a Democrat, and it happens all the time in their state legislature, where two Republicans will lock out Democrats just because there were two random Joe Schmo Republicans decided to run for state assembly. And then the smattering of Republicans who vote just happen to have very little strategic voting in state assembly races, by the way, but it just so happens that they lock the Democrats out of that seat, and then they have it for, 2-4 years. If that happens in the governor's race, first off, Gavin Newsom will resign. I mean, it will be so embarrassing for him and that system will become a threat to democracy overnight, even though it will be as direct a democracy as you can hope for. But look, I think this is ultimately funnily an in-kind contribution to Swalwell politically, just because that's how our politics work. It looks very bad for him. I mean, she was honeypotting people across the country, including Swalwell. And I don't remember when there were, I'm not an expert in Eric Swalwell's dating timeline history here, but he was either already on the House Intel Committee,
correct,
or
he was
going to, or was like very obviously going to be on the House Intel Committee. And my friend Greg Price had a great tweet when there was a James O'Keefe Sting video that came out. And he said, if you're working in the Biden administration and a super hot girl wants to go on a date with you, there's a strong chance she works for James O'Keefe. And if you're Eric Swalwell, you like, I don't know, I haven't been honeypotted by a Chinese spy, but I just feel like, what were the conversations that they were having? Like, hey, babe, what did you do at work today? Oh, yeah, I just came from the embassy. Got any good briefings? Working on anything interesting in Congress? It's incredibly problematic. And he may nevertheless, if there's a Republican and a Democrat who advances in California, obviously the Democrat will win. And it may very well be Swalwell, in which case this spy, Fang Fang, has got to be hosting the biggest party ever in China, which is not that far away from California. So it will have been the most successful honeypot in recent American history to have done that to the guy who becomes governor of California. Outside of that, I don't know what exactly to make of it. I mean, this is a thing, obviously, Republicans have made fun of him for years over, for good reason. And,
what do you make of the fact?
I'm curious. Look, I think,
Matthew, the FBI, unless there's a new piece of information, they are 100% doing this because he is a candidate for governor and he's a serious candidate. And, Republicans rightfully said when I don't think all those cases, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, come forward if not for the fact that Donald Trump was continuing to think about running for office again. I mean, to me, look, I laugh because it is such a ridiculous weaponization of the FBI. Now, I think you're going to hear Republicans say, look, it's out in the open. So, what would you
suggest that Katie Porter,
ridiculous.
What would you suggest that Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, et cetera, do with this?
I mean, I think it probably does the same thing that it did to Ron DeSantis and everyone else, which is, are you going to defend your own or are you going to defend the other side? And I think it will, you said it before, likely cause other Democrats to snap rally around Swalwell. And I agree with you. If it is a runoff between a Democrat and a Republican in California, not a runoff, but a general election, it is likely the Democrat wins. So
it is certain.
to me, it's just remarkable. But all right, it's 9:25. Let's take a few questions here. What do we have? Okay. Question: why do we value polls? I've never been asked to participate in, and I'm 62 years old. I've been voting since 1982. Look, great question. How they do these is changing. Trying to get cell phones is hard. Trying to get people to pick up their phones is hard. Obviously, 16, 20, polls really whiffed. There's obviously the famous Ann Selzer in Iowa. Again, I'll go to my grave with this. She's one of the best pollsters I've ever seen, but boy, she got that wrong. Tough to have that on your resume. But look, not all polls are bad. Some pollsters have nailed races, down to the decimal. But it's hard. Polls are a statistical model of who you think will turn out. And as we saw in 16, they missed all these Trump voters that had emerged who were going to turn out. And if your model's off, your poll's off. So I don't know, Matthew, if you think the polling industry is terrible.
Have you been polled before?
No. Nope.
I have been one time. I basically agree with this premise here. And or they can be fake. It can be a push poll, which is like expressly fake, or they can be fake, like what I was referring to the Alaska poll as. Whereas I would joke that I worked at the Congressional Leadership Fund Super PAC in 2020. I was their rapid response director. And I would joke with my friends who were doing our polling stuff. I'm like, you guys have it so easy. It's completely non-falsifiable, because if you're polling, and at CLF, we spent, I think, about $1 million in Arkansas for French Hill because it looked like he was in danger of losing. And what the polling people would say is, well, he was. And then we spent, and then we took the race off the map. Or we got a bad as in false poll that showed a race in Arkansas is going to be competitive. I think being a pollster is awesome because you can just say whatever you want. And as long as you're far enough out from the election, you can fall back on saying, well, it was true that day. They always say polls are a snapshot in time. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on as a result of polls. And I don't know that we should.
Well, the interesting thing is, look, ultimately, if a pollster is not good, they won't be in business very long. And there are good pollsters. They're not perfect. They do get stuff wrong. But there are, and I'll say this about Ann Selzer. I can point to probably a dozen races where she nailed it. Go back to 2008 when everyone said she was crazy the weekend before the Iowa caucus when she said Barack Obama was going to win. Folks, she nailed that, I think, within 1/10 of a point. Literally the Clinton margin, the Edwards margin, everything. So sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. But good question there. Let's go to the next question here. What are your thoughts on Bessent launching a fraud crackdown and offering money to whistleblowers to expose scams? I think it's great. I mean, look, fraud is fraud. The common sense answer is if you can find it, stop it. I think what's fascinating is I'd be just as curious how much they're putting into finding, Medicare and Medicaid fraud in Florida as they are into, their focus on Minnesota and Illinois. But it's not to say you shouldn't focus on Minnesota and Illinois. But if you're really serious about fraud, you really ought to look where, there is a lot. I'll give you another one. The Pentagon, I would be going through there with a fine-tooth comb. People have always said in both parties that the procurement process is one of the most outrageous that there is. So, Matthew, thoughts?
Next day's coming up. I don't like my money being wasted. I like it being spent blowing Ayatollahs to smithereens. Roger Williams, the chair of the Small Business Committee, I think he's pushed for something similar with COVID waste funds. You get 10% up to 50,000 or something like that of what you're able to find. By the way, this is like AI's calling card here right now. Go do this, people. You can make a lot of money. I'm not smart enough to figure that out.
All right, let's take one more here. Question: how much time do each of you spend on X per day? Oh, God. Do you just post and leave? Rachel, who's not here, is it important in your work? What journalists do you follow on it? Or is it just a venue for meanness now? Republican lady, I spend a few hours on it a day. I do not just post and leave. I actually do go through it. Sometimes I, respond. Sometimes I don't, just because you can lose your mind responding on there. look, I have talked to Rachel about this, and Sean, I personally follow people on both sides of the aisle. People who are extremely conservative, people who are super progressive. And I do it just because I want to see what everyone is saying. I don't have to agree with it, and often don't, even in my own party. But if you want to understand the pulse of what is either trending, what topics are out there, or how people are feeling, it is a real-time, speaking of polling, it's a real-time snapshot. You just have to remember X is not the real world, right? And so there are times that you see stuff going back and forth and the intensity meters at 100 on X, and then I'll, even in New York City, walk out and on the street and nobody's talking about it. Like, just nobody cares. And so it's like anything. It's just one source and one snapshot. But I think to be in politics, Matthew, you can't not track what's going on there.
I'm going to plead the fifth on how much time I spend on it, but I think that Elon Musk buying it changed the course of the world, and was an amazing, very selfless decision by him. I don't use it at all for my day job of running the Washington Reporter in terms of story selection at all, because of what you're saying, Dan, that so much of that is fake. That is, phone calls, text. I was at CPAC, so going to events in person, things like that. I do use it a lot in terms of knowing, for when I go on Newsmax, where I'm a contributor, of knowing, like you said, what people are thinking, where shows like this and like what I go on TV are much more, this is what people are aware of. And most TV shows, their story selection is entirely driven by like 25
Trending.
Twitter accounts tweeting things, which is not good, but that is a reality. So if you want to be informed in politics, there's literally, other than watching this show, there's no other place to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, Republican lady, you can't underestimate what Matthew just said about the way the media, whether it's print, the big print publications, or cable, monitor what is trending. And they want to jump on whatever is trending, either to talk about as a segment, to book guests, whatever. So, you got to keep an eye on it. But there's a reason Trump posts on social media. It's effective. It gets your message out, and you can see how people react in real time. So, all right, one more question here, and then we'll go. All right, another one from Republican lady. Is the decision by the International Olympic Committee to ban men for women's competitions due to Trump, and a win for him because it prevents ugly litigation passport issues at games? I think it's a win for Trump because he did raise this before most other politicians. And this is something that it's funny. I was asked in, I think it was April of 24, what is the sleeper issue out there? And it was with like 15 people, and everyone went around, and this was actually my issue, because it just resonates with so many parents. Just, if you have, we have 4 boys, but when I think of, we have one boy who's now 16, who at 13 had armpit hair and was pretty, stocky. And then I look at, if he were playing soccer against fellow 13-year-olds, and you look at some young women at 13, some are more mature and developed than others, I would be scared for my daughter that if he bumped into them or he went full throttle and kicked a ball, he could hurt somebody. So he does deserve credit for raising this. I know to others it's a negative, but I think to the average American, this is a common sense victory.
And that's probably your kid who stole your blanket, by the way. I think this would not have happened if Kamala Harris had won. It's a win for Trump, but most importantly, it's a win for female athletes. It's a win for biology. It's a win for common sense, for history, for the Olympics. And we know this would not have happened if Trump had not won.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was
literally ended his career because he said that he wouldn't want your 16-year-old son to pummel his daughter in sports, and now he has no career.
Well, I think it was the Penn swimmer who shattered all those records, who was
the mediocre man.
She was a he, and she didn't just beat the records, she beat them by his, just shocking amounts. And I think the average person was like, whoa, time out. This is just not right. So a victory for Trump. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you,
and hey,
Matthew.
go Team USA. Our men and women.
That's right. You survived. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everybody for tuning in. We think Sean and Rachel will both be back tomorrow, but stay tuned. We will see. But otherwise, enjoy your Monday, and we'll see where the world goes. Thanks so much.